Hello to all my people, and if you're watching live, checking us out on YouTube, or listening on your favorite podcast provider, you are most definitely my people. Welcome to another episode of Botched, Bots, and Chair Shots. I am your host, a chef by trade and a mark by choice. I am the Will Gray, and joining me tonight is an actress, a producer, a singer, the manager of champions, and the champion of managers, the glamazon, the notorious PDM, Pollo Del Mar. Pollo, how are you? Thanks for coming on and chatting about some wrestling.
I love any opportunity to talk about pro wrestling, so thank you for having me.
This always is such a great conversation because every time I do it, I get to hear a new story. So I always start kind of the origin point. I always say, seeing some of your Twitch streams, you and I have chatted about it. I grew up the late days of the NWA. Then it turned into WCW, the Attitude Era. I was a teenager. What do you remember watching as a kid? What were you exposed to?
Well, I had the great opportunity to actually see a lot of territory wrestling on my television. So that is a tremendous amount of what I grew up watching. But my love and passion was really inspired by all of those territories that contributed at that time to the National Wrestling Alliance, which is, of course, the NWA still existing and producing talent and content every single week. You can watch us on Tuesdays and Saturdays, but that was my true love. And then WWF obviously exploded in popularity the way it did. That was a big part of it as well. But I will say that the feel between NWA and WWF at that time was so different, and my heart was always with the NWA.
So you had a very elaborate career before you ever stepped foot in a squared circle. What about the decision at that point in your life made you to go, okay, let's dabble in pro wrestling now?
Well, I had always been in love with the concept of being a pro wrestling personality or professional wrestler. And so many things did not seem to align to allow that earlier on. And I went into a career as a journalist, and I was writing about celebrity features. I was, a columnist and contributor to Huffington Post for 7 years, as well as writing for magazines and newspapers literally around the world for many years. My beat was celebrities. So after a period of time, I decided, what is preventing me from covering the celebrities of professional wrestling the same way I'm contributing and covering all of these celebrities of pop culture, like movies and films and television. So that was what refocused me once again into covering professional wrestling. And it was through that experience that I soon was extended an offer to actually participate in pro wrestling. And once I put my foot in the door, there's no getting me out.
You've just gone. You've 100%. You've climbed the hill everywhere you've been. We'll stick with the NWA for now. You and Silas Mason, you guys, he's just pounding through the ranks week over week every time. How are things right now with you and the Thrillbilly?
Things are phenomenal with Silas and myself. And I suppose if we're talking about the Thrillbilly, I should give you my accent, y'all. I have a degree in broadcast. I had to get rid of that damn darn accent to go off and do other things. But Silas and I are an incredible pairing, and things are so good for us right now. Anybody who is not aware, Silas Mason will be facing ECIII in the main event of night one of the NWA Crockett Cup coming June 3rd and 4th to Winston-Salem, North Carolina. If you cannot be with us in person in North Carolina, tickets are available. It's worth the drive. But if you cannot be with us there, get it on Fight TV. That is the place to be on June 3rd and 4th. I'm super excited. And obviously, Silas getting a first major title opportunity within the NWA. And it's coming at just the perfect time because I believe the fan support for us is at an all-time high.
So you talked about your love for the NWA as a young wrestling fan. The Crockett Cup has been around for years. It's one of their staples year over year. How does it feel now? How important is it for you to be in there now, to be in the NWA, and to be a part of the Crockett Cup coming into this year?
Well, I'll start with how important it is to me to be part of the National Wrestling Alliance in general, because this is a chosen path for me. I specifically chose to pursue the National Wrestling Alliance. It is where I fell in love with pro wrestling. It's where all of the greatest individuals of all time, in my estimation, started their careers. And many of them went their entire career not wanting to leave the NWA. So for me, I look at the people who it's produced, people who were groundbreakers for me, people like Baby Doll and people like Dark Journey. These are people who some people might not even recognize, but they were so integral to me. There was James J. Dillon, Jim Cornette. The list of fantastic managers to come out of the National Wrestling Alliance is unparalleled. So that was always a place that I wanted to be. And to have that opportunity to walk into, even though they're not the same halls and they're not just to be part of that hallowed halls of the National Wrestling Alliance, to be part of that history and legacy that we still talk about to this day, an incredible thing for me. And in terms of wrestling pay-per-view events, I am an unabashed mark for tag team wrestling, and that has made the Crockett Cup throughout history my all-time favorite pay-per-view event across the spectrum of professional wrestling. So when I entered into the National Wrestling Alliance, I've told this story recently because it's so topical, but I went right up to Billy Corgan and I said, Mr. Billy Corgan, I have always dreamed of being part of the Crockett Cup. I hope that dream comes true. Well, fans, listeners, anybody who's watching this, in about 2.5 weeks' time, my dream does come true, and in ways that I would have never imagined, because I will be at ringside in the main event of the Crockett Cup, watching Thrillbilly Silas Mason become the next national heavyweight champion for the National Wrestling Alliance.
I'm really excited for the show. Just as a fanboy sitting on that side of the guardrail, I can't wait for that weekend. It's going to be a fantastic show. Looking at it though, the NWA, it's come such a long way from Waterloo, Iowa. Now we've got Billy Corgan at the helm. It's gone through multiple management groups. How is it right now, the chemistry in the locker room, the feel with the company with Billy at the helm?
I can't speak to what it was ever like before, obviously, because I came in during the Lightning One era of the National Wrestling Alliance under Billy Corgan's watchful eye. But what I can speak to is that every single person in that locker room knows, loves, and appreciates, and most importantly, wants to continue the history and legacy of the National Wrestling Alliance. And we're all there working for the same goal. We do want to continue making the National Wrestling Alliance a top-tier professional wrestling organization. So I think in that regard, it's as good as anyone could hope for. In terms of my personal experience there, one of the things that's been super rewarding is, since my debut as an on-air personality, and I've worked in different capacities at the National Wrestling Alliance. I did a pay-per-view one-off first, and then I worked behind the scenes for a brief period of time as a producer on the 10 Pounds of Gold. Now I'm an on-air personality, and I am working on some other things that will be coming to light very, very, very soon in relation to NWA as well. But one of the things that I love is that Billy Corgan, first of all, he's so passionate about what we do. I mean, this man took money from his own pocket, his own earnings, to purchase the National Wrestling Alliance name and legacy so that he could continue it, to make sure it did not become obscure and fall away into that somewhere become a footnote in wrestling history. So he's very inspired and passionate about what we do. And I think that he collects people around him who are the same. And one of the things I love most is that Billy, in the time that Silas and I have been an on-air pairing, been entertaining the audiences of National Wrestling Alliance, he has grown to, I think, really trust us in terms of our vision for what we want to present. He loves the fact that we can walk in front of a camera and one and done in terms of a promo. So there's certainly that. But he also, I get the perception that he appreciates from us how we respectively connect with our audiences, both on camera and, through social media and things of that nature. I love that part about it.
Having a chance to work with so many legends. When I saw the NWA, you guys were here in December, I think, last year, sometime around there, end of the year last year. You came to Nashville, you had some tapings. Ricky the Dragon was there. Phenomenal show as always, but it's just a laundry list of legends that come through that locker room. How is it having a chance to work with all of these guys that helped pave the way, the men and the women that paved the way through the NWA to get it where it is today?
I freak out when we have legends in the locker room. I'm just going to be very upfront about it. I think in the wrestling industry, we are supposed to no sell the concept that we are sometimes overwhelmed or just enamored with the people that are in our presence, because that doesn't seem cool or that makes you a fan and not a professional. But I've never met an individual yet in the world of professional wrestling who did not pursue this as an industry and a career that wasn't a massive fan of pro wrestling beforehand. So I will be blunt. I was too intimidated to go up and talk to Ricky the Dragon Steamboat. I have found myself like teetering when it comes to talking to others. And I'm so glad I pushed through that, because, you know, we have Bobby Fulton of the Fantastics, another legend working with us on a regular basis. Dr. Tom Pritchard, legend. Ricky Morton, obviously legend. Medusa, Jazz, legends. We have frequently in depending on where we're at, we have it in the locker room, people like Raven, and, you know, even people who are current, like Bully Ray is also a legend in this industry and a Hall of Famer in his own right. So there are times when it feels incredibly overwhelming. And there are times when I also know that they probably wish I would go away, because I will just like, tell me about this, tell me about that. And I'll chatter their ears off about things, because these are people whose careers, specifically for someone like myself, when I talk about loving old school wrestling, I'm not talking Attitude Era. I'm talking 80s NWA usually, or territories. And these are people who were legitimately making those places, times, and territories relevant and capturing headlines at the time. So for me, this is like legit. Oh my God. And I cannot go without mentioning Baby Doll. Baby Doll has worked with us so many times. And Baby Doll, of course, is one of my biggest inspirations. So when I'm in the presence of these individuals, to me, it feels almost like I had that opportunity to work during those times, because I get to hear the stories.
The NWA, you guys travel all over the country, all over the world. Just got back from Australia for some of them.
And I'm mad as hell about it. But
I saw Silas was there. I got him right before he left.
Silas Mason got to go, and he spent 2 weeks down there just kicking all them arses.
It looked like a blast. So when you look at the skeleton, the layout of the old NWA days, the American independent circuit still kind of falls into that graph some. You've still got the Appalachians and your JCPs. You get into New York and New Jersey's. When the NWA travels today, do you still see the differences in the crowds when you go from territory to territory, East Coast to West Coast?
I certainly think that you can. I think a big part of one of the things that dictates how different crowds respond to things, you know, in the current National Wrestling Alliance, we don't always have as much of those well-defined heroes and villains. I think a lot of it is left open to the interpretation. Billy seems to really lean into audiences deciding who's the hero, who's the villain, who's the good guy, who's the bad guy, the heel, the babyface. So there are times when we go to a different location and maybe the crowd's not as in love with somebody as we would have expected. And I think I'm a big example of that, because, you know, I can be a polarizing figure. I think depending on what people's beliefs are or what they want to embrace or don't want to embrace, I think people everywhere can have a different perspective of my ability to contribute in the world of professional wrestling. We've had instances where the audience was lukewarm and I had to like work extra to get that kind of response that I wanted. And I feel fortunate that I've been able to do that. But in terms of what we experience location to location, I think that a lot of that has been homogenized by having broadcast television where everybody can see the same things, right? Back in the day, you were relegated to seeing whatever exclusively might have broadcast on your own local cable network, or, you know, not even cable network, what might have broadcast on your local antenna. So with us today, people around the world are seeing the same thing. So they are up to date. One of the things I do think changes location to location is we have the opportunity to bring in a lot of localized talent to work these shows and these TV tapings. And localized audiences very much want to support their hometown heroes. So we've gotten some great responses for people who our televised audience might know a lot less about because they are the hometown hero.
Looking at the NWA again, I stick with it, and I'm an old school guy at heart. I gladly proclaim to be the old man on my porch screaming "Get off my lawn" a lot of times. Like that's the joke. I'm the old head. So when you look at the NWA and the roles that the managers historically have played, you rattled off a few: your J.J. Dillons, your Cornettes, everybody that came through it. Looking at where you're at right now, what do you feel your part of the story tells when you go out with Silas?
I think for those individuals who are longtime fans of professional wrestling, I represent an underappreciated art form in this day and age, which is the valet, which is, there's a distinction. I consider myself a manager, but the presentation of a valet versus a manager back in the day was very different. Most of the time, a valet, quite honestly, was legitimately anyone who was a female. That was the valet. But we saw throughout history such legendary valets, people whose character and presence at ringside enhanced the in-ring character and product of the person that they were attributed to. Baby Doll has worked with a veritable who's who of people in the world of professional wrestling, and she wasn't ever considered or called a manager. She was always a valet. And then we get to see people like Precious, who was with Gorgeous Jimmy Garvin throughout history. And in fact, Gorgeous Jimmy Garvin and Ronnie Garvin are going to be with us at the Crockett Cup as two of our incredible legend talents, as is Tully Blanchard. Speaking of Baby Doll, Tully is going to be there as well. But we could go through history and look at the Missy Hyatts, the Dark Journeys, the Sherry Martells. Like Sherry Martell was, positioned depending on where she was as either a valet or a manager, sometimes both. But Sherry Martell is, you might be able to tell if you look closely, there's some action figures behind me. Sherry Martell is one of my all-time favorites. Luna Vachon, Nancy Benoit. These are all legends who lived in that place of being a valet. And because the term valet has become far less used in modern history, having an individual like myself sort of reinvigorating it, I think is a really positive thing. I think it's missing. I'm glad to fill the gap.
I think those sensational Sherrys and the Womans, they revolutionized. Without them, we wouldn't have ever got a Lita. They kind of changed how women bumped at that time in the business.
Sherry Martell was a very, very skilled and acclaimed women's professional wrestler before she was like kind of aged out of that role and put into the role at ringside because they knew what she could do.
Do you feel like current product right now, as we see it in pro wrestling, it's missing something because there aren't these polarizing managers a lot of time? There's a handful. You've got your Heymans and your Pollos and your, there's a couple out there, but they're not nearly as, it's not nearly as present as it was in the 70s or 80s. Do you feel like pro wrestling's missing something by not having those managers and valets present?
Absolutely. In the WWE at this point in time, there's only a couple. MVP fills that role. We've got Paul Heyman, obviously. Paul Heyman is the pinnacle of what anyone should aspire to be. And then in AEW, we have a lot more. Many of them are considered coaches or things like that, but they fill that spot. AEW, in my opinion, kind of overdoes it because there's so many and so many factions or whatever that you don't really get to know any of them specifically. I'm liking some of the work that Sanjay Dutt is doing there. He's doing well. I think he adds something to the Jeff Jarrett, Jay Lethal, all of that. So that's great. I'm appreciative of that. But outside of that, in the world of independent professional wrestling, there are so few. And when people, and it's happened repeatedly in the last few years, when people have said that I'm the best known or the most successful or the most acclaimed manager in independent professional wrestling, at first I was like, that's not true. There's all these, wait, are there all these people? And then I realized it's like winning a beauty pageant when you're the only entrant.
I have a very limited time with you. It would be crazy of me not to speak on something other than wrestling, because like I said, you've had a wild career. So I'm going to ask you kind of You've done acting. You've had cameos on shows, roles in films. You're a superstar. I want to know, just out of curiosity, is there a big difference in ring versus being on the silver screen?
Well, yes. I mean, if you're acting, if you're doing acting for a film or a television series, things like that, and I've done both, it's a very closed set type of situation. You're not performing in front of a live audience. Being ringside, you are interacting and you have the opportunity to do what, if you're kind of making that correlation, would be considered improv. You get to work off of the energy of the crowd. You get to work off of their responses. You get to shift and pull some things back if you're not really thinking that those are working, and move other things to the front to get that kind of audience response you want. I'm very lucky that what prepared me in great part for what I do had nothing to do with television or films, because I can learn a script, but what I had to learn that makes me very effective, I believe, in my position now, is I hosted live events and knew how to control audiences from 50 to 5,000 with my words, with my presence, with my presentation. And you understand how to feed off of those audiences and also feed them what they need to stay in that moment.
I would be hard pressed. My producer would kill me if I didn't mention the fact that when I was doing my due diligence, I found out you did some stand-up comedy with the Countess, Luann de Lesseps, from The Real Housewives. My producer's huge fan, so when she was here, she was like, "You have to ask her, what's the Countess like off camera?"
I think that I've never seen the Countess. This is horrible to admit. I literally opened for Countess Luann, and yet I do not remember a single episode of whichever Housewives she was on. I'm not a big fan of the Real
I think
Housewives.
it was New York, honestly. I'm not real sure either.
Probably. I'm not a big fan of the Real Housewives franchise. That's probably gonna get me canceled on social media. I take it back, y'all. I mean, I literally don't care. I will tell you this. I have an inside piece of information. One of my gal pals is going to be joining the Real Housewives of Beverly Hills soon, and I just learned that over the weekend at of all places, RuPaul's DragCon. But Countess Luann, I think, was I had not only opened for her, but I was in a parade with her. And I think that's a great deal, perhaps, of what you see on camera might be reality for her. She is definitely a presence. I think that she realizes her level of importance and the level of visibility. And I don't want to say anything negative about her, but I do know that there were some questions about her, whether she likes to drink or not, for a while, and she does.
So stand-up comedy, pro wrestling, you're acting. Do you blend it all together? Like, do you take pieces from each one to kind of keep building who you are?
The reason I think that my career has kind of gone all over the place is that I am a multifaceted, multi-talented individual with a very short attention span. So, and I'm a workaholic. So what that means for people who don't understand is that number one, my mind is like all over the place. Like, I'll be driving to take my dogs to the beach, and I'll be writing a song on the way to the beach. And then, that gets put away because when I'm at the beach, I'm probably actually writing part of my column for the upcoming issue of Pro Wrestling Illustrated, which you can find on newsstands across the country. Or, maybe like jotting down notes for an upcoming promo, or sending out my resume to get new opportunities in the world of professional wrestling. So I'm constantly doing something. And what ends up happening is, because my interests are so diverse, anytime I have a moment of downtime, I'll just shift the gears and go over in that direction. And then, something may sit completely on the shelf for a year and a half. But when I have free time to go back to it, I'm like, okay, this is almost ready. And then I'll polish it some more. And I think all of them collectively reflect very much kind of the type of person I am. There's always something going on with me. I always have some kind of project in the works. I'm always looking for new and interesting ways to entertain myself as well as audiences. And I also am looking for things that will allow me to reach new audiences, because there may be some people who discovered me because of a terrible dance song I put out 5 years ago. And there's some people who may have discovered me because they saw me on a podcast. And there are some people who may discover me because I've been in pro wrestling, or I was in a video with their pop star, or open for this person on stage, or, so there's a lot of opportunities. This phone is ringing, and it's not an opportunity right now for them to. The manager of champions, the champion of managers, always doing manager of champions, champion of managers things, but I'll have to put that on hold. So yeah, what I'm saying is that every opportunity to reach a new audience member is one I want to take, because I love interacting with people.
Going through your career, I was, like I said, I was looking for highlights. And one of those highlights, and me being me, I'm going to tie it into wrestling. You had a chance to work with Cyndi Lauper. It was 2008. It was a very different, it wasn't the rock and wrestling Cyndi Lauper, but you still had a chance to work with her. How was it?
She is very cool. It was a surprise to me. I considered it somewhat early in my career, but as a drag performer, but I will admit that the way I approached drag was the way I approach everything. And that is, I don't dip my toe in things. I cannonball, and there you have it. So my career in entertainment took off really, really quickly. And somebody who I had worked with before to interview Cyndi Lauper multiple times was the one who connected me with that. But there is something, the same way that I talked about, having my mind blown just by being in the presence of the wrestling greats that I get to be around, knowing how influential Cyndi Lauper truly was in the world of professional wrestling, not to mention being an iconic Broadway writer, iconic pop star, actress, all the things that she is. And on top of it all, an amazing philanthropist who dedicates a tremendous amount of her time to raising awareness for some phenomenal causes, especially as relates to the LGBTQ community. I was so honored to work with her, and it was very heartwarming to recognize that she is as down to earth and delightful in person as you would expect her to be.
So this is a question. This question is just purely for fun for me now. You've had a chance. You've been on TV sets, the movie sets. You've been in wrestling locker rooms. Which one is more exciting and has a little bit more fun? Is it the Hollywood guys, or is it the wrestling locker room?
Wrestling locker room, 100%. It's not even a competition. It's because you must understand that for me, pro wrestling was a lifelong dream since I was about 7, 8 years old. That was my dream. And the fact that it is coming true now, the fact that it is coming true in ways that, quite honestly, I think as a kid, I could have put on a wish list, is this is exactly what I want to do. And they are happening like that. Like I said, I work for the National Wrestling Alliance. I'm going to be at the Crockett Cup on June 3rd and 4th in Winston-Salem, North Carolina, managing the Thrillbilly Silas Mason in a major main event title match. That's straight ripped from somebody's dreams. I'm a columnist and contributor to Pro Wrestling Illustrated, which was a childhood dream as well. And the fact that I am even known in the world of professional wrestling at all, much less to the degree that is continuing to grow, these are things that a very young me would have had as a bucket list. And I'm doing them, and it's only the beginning for me. These are already accomplished, and I'm continuing to move forward.
This is hands down my favorite question I always ask. It's towards the end. You have a chance. You're going to hop in the time machine. You're going to go back in time. You're going to talk to Rookie Pollo, the rookie PDM. What advice do you give that person today?
The advice that I would give to myself, as I want to go back before that. I want to go back before, rookie me. You know what I mean?
Absolutely.
Rookie me was not that long ago. It was just 7 years ago. I would like to go back to the very, very young version of myself that questioned not my abilities, because even as a young kid, I knew that I was talented at what I wanted to do, but questioned whether or not I deserved to accomplish those things. I would go back and tell that person, you are 100% worthy as anybody else in this world, of living all of your dreams. Anything that you want to accomplish, you should set your mind to it. It doesn't mean that you will accomplish it, but you can rest easy knowing that you gave your all to accomplish what you dream of. And if you don't get it, that is somebody else's decision, and it does not reflect on you. I would also say this to anybody else who's listening. Like, if you are dreaming of doing something, do not let your fear of what somebody else might think of you having that dream or working towards that dream to prevent you from working towards that dream. I did that to myself for a really long time. I did that. I said no to myself to prevent the possible heartache of other people saying no to it. And what I discovered is that I made myself the bad guy, number one. And even if in this right now, I could tell you, even if in the current state of success that I'm having, if I go balls to the wall for something and I don't get there, at least I know I've done it. I tried it. There's no worse regret in life than wondering what might have been if you'd have simply tried.
Okay, we're here. We're at the end, but I can't let you off the hook now. I always close with 5 random. One of yours has to do with wrestling. I've got them queued up. You ready?
I'm ready.
Number 1. What is your favorite venue you've ever had a chance to participate in a wrestling show in?
Hammerstein Ballroom in New York City.
Solid pick. Number 2. What is your favorite movie?
Clueless.
Also a solid pick.
That's my modern current movie. Anti-Mame featuring Rosalind Russell, my all-time favorite movie.
Question number 3. Who was your favorite superstar growing up?
In wrestling?
Mm-hmm.
My favorite superstar growing up in professional wrestling was Jake the Snake Roberts. He was my first ever favorite professional wrestler. But my all-time favorite overall everything is the Midnight Express and Jim Cornette.
Up there for me as well. Question number 4. Who's your favorite actor or actress?
I don't particularly have favorite actors or actresses because I tend to divorce myself from that idea. I love particular characters that people may have acted, but my appreciation for them as an actor doesn't necessarily roll over. I think that if I were really pressed to pick a favorite actor or actress, I think Tom Hanks might be up there.
And question number 5. Who's your favorite musical artist?
Oh, gosh. My favorite musical artist probably varies by decade or generation. I would say that the most influential on me throughout the course of my life is Madonna. My love affair with her kind of has waned, but I think that my overall favorite, like everything, Mariah Carey.
Excellent. Pollo, I appreciate your time tonight. This is the opportunity for you to plug your stuff, put yourself over, tell everybody where to find you in your socials.
Absolutely. You can follow me. This is complicated. You can follow me on Twitter, the Glamazon PDM. You can follow me on most everything else as Pollo Del Mar Fans. Somebody already had my name. I had to go with the fans thing. It's why I never got verified on most of those. But it's a great way. Or you can just Google like Pollo Del Mar drag queen. And that will pull up a lot of stuff. I'm on Twitch. I'm on the TikTok. I'm on Instagram and Twitter and Facebook. You can find me all over the place. And I'm sure if something new pops up tomorrow, I'll like race to get that too.
Pollo, I genuinely appreciate it. And thanks for stopping by and chatting about some wrestling with me.
Of course. Hope to see you around. And thank you for having me on to talk about all things National Wrestling Alliance.
Absolutely. I'll be in Winston. That's for sure.
Oh, I love that. We love that.
Yeah. For the Glamazon Pollo Del Mar, I am the Will Gray. Thanks for stopping by and listening, my people.